When called upon, thank you. When called upon, applicants and speakers will come to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Don't approach the podium until vacated by the previous speaker. Speak into the microphone, please, and identify yourself and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comment, question, and testimony to the committee. Limit your comments to 3 minutes. It is unnecessary to repeat testimony previously given by others. Citizens may address the committee on the agenda items by corresponding to the chair's call for speakers during the discussion on each item and signing the speaker's log on the podium. All comments must be relevant to the item. The chair or presiding officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please see the agenda for more information about these requirements. If you parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Rex Elementary School or the Arts District parking garage immediately south of City Hall, staff can provide a parking validation ticket for you. The agenda and the documents are located at https://okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You would then select the Riverfront Design Committee meeting, then click on an agenda item, and the relevant documents will come up below the item. Keith, will you please call the roll?
Heisel,
Present.
Montoya,
Present.
Howard,
Present.
Lyons, Postic,
Present.
Prado,
Present.
Templeton.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum. And I'm going to get into the live meeting here. All right. Thank you. Item 2, approval of minutes.
I have a comment. I noticed an error in the minutes. I'm not sure legally how is best to address this.
If you notice, you can always notify staff before the meeting. We can make the correction. We can then announce it at the meeting.
Okay.
Or you can tell us now what that correction is, and then there could be a motion made to accept or approve the minutes as corrected. Does that sound good, Dustin?
Yes.
Okay.
I would need another commissioner to make that motion because it regards the item that I recused myself from, but the motion listed in the minutes is word for word the motion listed from the previous agenda item, and so it just appears to be a typo, but the commissioners listed as voting is different than the previous item, so it's likely the right votes, it's just the wrong wording. I'm looking at agenda item 7B.
Yes. And I do see that, and I apologize for that. And so what you're talking about is we actually need to, what I'm going to suggest is why don't we just bring this back at the next meeting, we'll get it fixed, and that'll just be easier.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of corrections that need to be made, and thank you. But you can always call us in advance, and we'll work on getting that done, so it makes it a little easier at the meeting, so.
A rare scenario that we noticed any errors, so I wasn't sure how to proceed.
That's okay, not a problem.
Thank you.
We'll get it fixed.
So motion to continue this item to the
Or
next meeting?
do we actually need that, Dustin? Nah, we'll just bring it back at your
Okay.
next meeting.
Great.
All right. I'll let the screens clear before we move to item 3. All right. Item 3, cases withdrawn, none. Item 4, continuance requests, there are none. Item 5, consent docket. Number A is SRCA-22-000021, R2 at 901 Southeast 5th Street.
In just one moment, for some reason, the screen's not changing out here at all.
Okay.
Thank you. Go, and you can go ahead and read the second one. R.
And item B, SRCA-23-00005 at 1405 South Central Avenue, Regatta.
If anybody wanted to pull either of those, we could discuss them. Or we'd be looking for a motion to approve the consent docket.
I move to approve the consent docket.
Second.
I'm sorry, who was the second? Okay, thank
Dana.
you. Dana.
She's in there. All right, it passed.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Item 6A, cases for individual consideration. Item number A is SRCA-23-00001 at 2205 South Robinson Avenue. And
Thank
the
you. Let me
report.
pull the pictures up. So, some of you will probably remember seeing this building sit vacant for quite some time. It is just south of the railroad tracks going into Capitol Hill. And it is just past the Chileno's orange building that we have here, catty corner from the feed mill. And luckily, somebody is wanting to renovate the building and not just get rid of it. So I was very excited when I got the first phone call about this, and then that they submitted it. So you'll see an extensive list of stuff that they're going to do, because you can obviously tell that they had either covered up or removed all the windows. At the southern end, there was an addition that had been built at some point, and this proposal, they're proposing to demolish that addition, and then there's a new addition that they're proposing at that location. It is sitting on the corner, and so this is the view from that side street that comes down, and so you can see how all the windows had been covered over. And so then this is the northeast corner of the building. Obviously looking toward downtown, so you have a great view of Devon Tower at that location. You can see the details that are in the brick, and you can see the extensive amount of brick that's not painted, which is also fantastic that we still have that. And as I mentioned earlier, to the south, we have the Chileno's building. This is to the west, which is a vacant field. And then immediately across the street, you have the feed mill, and then you have this Acme radiator building that has these really cool smokestacks. We had an old picture in our office, and it was of those smokestacks, and I knew exactly where that was because I've never seen those on another building. And then this is the two vacant buildings that are immediately south. You can see the subject property here. And so we still have vacant buildings on that block. So I will go back to this right here. So in the staff report, there were no regulations that we had an issue with at all. There were some guidelines that we talked about, and you typically will see the same guidelines when somebody's coming in and they're doing work, either changing the windows out or adding windows or adding doors. And so they're proposing some changes. I am not aware of a picture. I've not found a picture of what this looked like originally. You could guess that it had big storefronts and you had the overhead doors on them. And so I reference from the Building Conservation and Rehabilitation Guidelines for Oklahoma City, where it talks about character-defining features and it talks about windows. And so in the consideration, the building was constructed in 1928, and the Sanborn maps of 1946 show it as an automobile dealership. And so, as you know, Robinson had a lot of automobile dealerships, not only in Hubcap Alley, but apparently down here in Capitol Hill as well. The applicant had told me the building was vacant for some time, and when I looked in the system for over 10 years, there have been repeated code enforcement cases that would lead you to believe, yes, it was vacant. So there was graffiti, grass and weeds, and there were probably some for it being not secured because they were having that issue with it getting broken into repeatedly during that time frame. One of the reasons we're excited about it is this is, as you're heading north, this is an entryway into Capitol Hill, and there's a lot going on in Capitol Hill right now with, just in the last year or so, with a significant amount of Capitol Hill put on the National Register. You have the old hospital that's been put on the National Register, and you have a lot of rehabilitation work that's going on in various parts of Capitol Hill. So this is just adding to that, and hopefully it will just start catching in this part of Capitol Hill. One of the concerns we had that we pointed out was they're altering numerous openings along the building's facade. And the concern we have is with the window spacing. And so we're concerned that the proposal for the current proportions are not really in keeping with the character of the building and the windows as well as the infill proportions. And when you look at the application that they were submitted, you can see how we had windows of different sizes. We have infill areas of different sizes, and in some cases there was a consistency with the size of the windows, the locations of the windows, the locations of the infill. But in other areas, we felt that it could have been slightly different so that it would have more of a positive effect on the appearance of the building. The other item that I discussed in here is the screening, and that deals with the dumpster enclosure. As submitted, they didn't have a gate on the dumpster enclosure, and they were required to do that. The confusion can be when you have industrial zoned property. If you're not in a design district, you don't have to put a gate on it. Well, this is in a design district, and so we need a site-proof gate on it. And as I explained that to the applicant, I said, you don't need to revise this now. I'll just put a condition on it, and then we'll agree with what this is going to look like when you get finished with it. The other thing that they were talking about in this is the zoning talks about 8 feet in certain zones, but 10 feet in industrial zones. But I have a guideline in Scenic River that has a maximum height of 6 feet. And so I don't have a problem with them going to 10 feet in this area for that enclosure, as well as for that fence that they're putting up. As I mentioned in here, the current fence that you can see here is 6 foot with the barbed wire. We don't allow barbed wire in Scenic River, although it is allowed in industrial zoning. And so by them going taller with their proposed fence, they're not going to have the barbed wire, and I think it would help in deterring people from climbing it if it's a 10-foot tall fence that they were trying to get over to get inside that area. So we don't have an issue with them doing that. So as I mentioned, there were 2 things that we're recommending a condition on, and we can go back and talk about those if you want. We're recommending approval of the project, and you can read it straight from here, with 2 conditions, and that's the applicant provide the detail of the required site-proof gate for the dumpster enclosure to staff prior to the issuance of the certificate of approval, and that's so we can actually include it in the document itself, and that the applicant works with staff to revise the window proportions and infill proportions to more closely match or mirror the proportions of that facade. So with that being said, and I'll go back to this view, do you have any questions?
Just a clarification, the proposed usage of the new, or of the renovated building is office and parking garage?
It's not really yes, it's parking, but not, it's parking for the vehicles used with this business. And so it's a service company, and they go out and, I'm trying to remember, I thought I put that in here. Headquarters for a domestically based service company, and they provide carpet cleaning, floor repair, landscaping, pest control, dustless blasting, concrete polishing, air duct cleaning, and other miscellaneous services. So they have a lot of fleet vehicles, and that indoor parking area is for all of their fleet vehicles. So their fleet vehicles will be inside all the time. They're working out the details of the indoor parking with plan review. We don't really get involved on stuff on the inside. And so then the parking that you see on the outside would be obviously for the employees. They come to work, they park, and then they would go get in their fleet vehicle and go on their routes. So they made some significant changes in their proposal based on the comments and based on design district requirements. And we do appreciate their willingness to do that.
Any other questions?
Laura, getting back to the 10-foot tall fence, is that a site-proof fence, or is that a,
No,
Chain link.
they're proposing a, I'm going to confirm because I don't want to misspeak.
I saw a photo,
They're proposing a 10-foot tall the black manufacturer-coated chain link fence. Because you can't do bare chain link in Scenic River, you can do the black or green
right?
coated, which I think those fences look a lot nicer than the bare chain link.
Okay. And then I had one other question, getting back to the issue that staff had about the windows. Just looking at their architectural plans, they look similar to what's there. Is it the height? Are they expanding the height?
Well, for example, when you look at the windows along Robinson, and there's like 3 different areas of glass, and every single area has a different width of the glass. And we were looking at some of those that if you narrowed up the glass, more matching one of the other areas, you'd end up with like one more pane, so to speak, and then it would look more symmetrical. Okay. So if you look at, just for example, you look at the middle windows, and you can see that they're wider than either side. And so we were kind of looking at it, well, if they more closely match the northernmost windows, the ones on the left, and had that, then they'd end up with like one more pane, and they would all be more symmetrical and proportional in that area. When you look at the infill areas, because they're doing the infill areas around the columns, and they're different sizes, and I honestly don't know if there is an infill solution or it's a window solution in those areas. But I had discussed that with the applicant, who's here, and can talk about that and can give you some insight about why in some areas they did infill versus windows. Because it would appear that the windows probably went all the way to the columns. I could be wrong, to begin with. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Now, they are continuing the knee wall in which I really appreciate that they're doing that, because there's currently, you can see a knee wall on the, between the garage doors, and in that area, they're actually going to continue, I call it a knee wall, it's probably some other term, but, and I think I can see it better if I go here. So, and I know it's a different color brick, but there's like 3 color bricks on this building, but they are going to continue that over when they do all the work. And there's a door on the other side of that that's here, that's coming out, so that they'll get rid of this, and then they're going to continue the knee wall across that.
Any other questions? Would the applicant like to say anything?
Hi, Shane Murray, RAD Collaborative. The gates, we obviously understand. We have no problem putting the gates on for the dumpster enclosures. As far as the windows go, the infill versus the window size there, if you look at that facade back on that elevation, you can see that the overhead doors aren't evenly spaced in between each bay. And with those already being there, with the drives already being there and the ramps, that's kind of what drove that infill. The other thing that doesn't really come through in this drawing is pretty much at each column, that slab drops 7 inches. So that was another reason we chose to put the solid walls in there, to allow that to be an area of transition. Nobody can park there, nobody can really do anything. It's really gonna be more of a ancillary storage space for a piece of equipment or something that they're gonna put there. And then on the windows, another thing that's not really coming through is we had Wallace Engineering go out and assess these openings. They're very big, and as you can imagine, from 1928, the lintels and everything aren't really properly sized. So those thicker lines that you see in each facade there is a steel tube frame that will go in there, and we're gonna use that to brace the window system and brace the opening, because it doesn't have all the proper lateral and support for it. So that's kind of how that came out. We tried to make that center portion match as best we could on this, but again, we used the infills on each side of the column to be the same size, and that's kind of how that worked out. But it was kind of an effort of economics with the owner on how we go about the steel frame that he wasn't planning on initially anyways, and then keeping the overall character of the building with all the glass out front. Because outside of the northeast corner there, the other 2 panes are going to be in the garage portion of the building. So it's really to bring in natural light for his employees as they're loading up in the morning and coming home at the end of the day.
Dana Templeton, could you explain to me again, I missed it, why the infill areas on either side of the column aren't equal?
So they're at each column they're equal sized, but they're different from one column to the next, and that has to do with the fact that the overhead doors were already in place. The ramps for those doors were already there. Those were from the original construction. So that's kind of what we let drive that. Because with each slab dropping 7 inches,
And you are maintaining the existing overhead doors? Or
there'll be
just
new overhead doors, but yes, we're maintaining the existing
openings.
openings.
Okay, did I put that in here? Since I say installed doors, normally I would say overhead doors, but when you look at the drawings and it says existing, I just thought they were going to leave them. So I would say that broadly, the scope of work would include them putting new doors in,
Yeah, no apologies.
which is preferred over leaving the current ones there.
No, they're new doors. Existing is for the opening.
Do we have submitted information on what those doors, windows, and LED wall packs look like?
We don't have information on that. The storefront will be a black aluminum storefront system. The overhead doors will just be a sectional steel door that we're going to paint to match the trim and everything with vision lights in it. And then the LED wall packs are going to be more of a minimal downlight is what we're going to put in there. But I don't have any specs on that right now.
Like one band of vision lights, or is it a glass door?
I'm sorry?
Like one band of vision lights and
Yes,
overhead doors?
yes, one band. He originally wanted to do the glass overhead doors, but with the district the way it is currently, he didn't want to put those in right now. More of a safety concern.
Any other comments or questions for our applicant?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Maybe just to clarify, Laura, that you will be meeting with the applicant again to discuss window placement, proportions, and et cetera?
If you include that as a condition of approval, if I heard you correctly, I still have a hard time hearing over here, it's set up so that I would be working with the applicant. I wouldn't just be designing it and selecting it for him because I don't know the peculiarities of the building or anything about the structural component, but
And the applicant would need to agree to that condition, and staff would probably appreciate a little additional direction from the committee on what you would want the extent to which you would want to see what's proposed revised.
I mean, obviously, they don't want to move the drives, they're already there. They don't want to move the overhead door openings, they're already there. You can see when you look at the northernmost band of windows that they go all the way to the column. And I think I mentioned, based on the way that it's currently boarded up or enclosed, it looks like the windows used to go all the way to the columns, and they were on either side. So if you feel that the infill areas are appropriate to remain infill, we really can't change the proportions without moving the doors, and that wasn't a recommendation of staff, because that would be an illogical suggestion, in my opinion. And so the only thing missing from this one, dealing with what I call the primary face, would be the south facade, which is because that's where the addition is. Wait a minute, is it north, south? It's north, I apologize. I got turned around. So they're continuing. Those windows, some of them, though, are infilled. As you can see. So if I'm not mistaken, if you look at the east elevation on that page, the middle window on the right, on the addition, so if you can shift over, Katie, so you can see all of that area. That middle one is infilled, correct? And then the one on either side will actually be a window. And those were driven by the use. They've got the bathrooms in that addition. And I've been places where they've had windows with, I get very uncomfortable when I go someplace and there's actually a big window in a bathroom that you can see out, and it's supposed to be one-way glass, because that just...
I think looking at this and comparing to the floor plan, starting on the right, that first bit of infill at the column is an office. Next to that is kind of the just accessory space within the garage. The other two are within the garage. So we were kind of trying to figure out if there were interior functions dictating a need for the infill.
I do agree with the fact that the fenestration needs to be consistent in size, I think. But, I'm just glad someone's taking this building and trying to do something with it. It's, the first start and stuff, so.
It's okay.
If I may. So on that middle portion, again, even if we were to, so as we looked at it with the owner and in our office, if we were to take that window even to the column, we felt that we were still getting away from the proportions of the building itself. Because then you'd have one infill on one side, because the way the building is constructed, the owner really doesn't want to have to put a window in next to on the north side of each overhead door. So even if we made that middle opening bigger, he didn't feel like it helped him at all. But by doing this, we're still respecting kind of the proportions within each bay by doing this, and really looking at the columns. And again, what kind of drove the window spacing on that was the structural frame that we had to work with the engineer on.
Maybe I wasn't clear. I haven't made it back to the elevations, the exterior drawings, but it looks like each pane or glazing section is a different, on this one to this one to this one, maybe different widths.
The north and the south ends are, I mean, they're within about an inch of each other. They're real close to being the same. It's really just that middle one.
Middle one.
I would clarify that the structural frame that's shown may be the most efficient solution, but that doesn't mean that an additional brace couldn't be added to match the proportions of the other bays.
No, it doesn't, but
It does add a little
as
cost.
you may understand, correct, he's already approaching a limit beyond what he ever wanted to on this building.
And as I mentioned, there were significant changes made in the project based on my comments, things that they didn't realize they were going to have to do. You know, if you look at the zoning, you typically, in some areas of town, if you have industrial zoning, you don't have to pave the whole parking lot. And so they weren't aware, and so they had to change that area. There were some other uses they had that they had to eliminate. So there were some changes made, which definitely added to the cost of the project. But, and I'm only saying that from the standpoint that it's not that they refused to make any changes, because they did make changes.
No, the owner really loves this building, he loves this part of town, and he's really wanting to bring something that kind of revitalizes this area, especially with what's going on in Capitol Hill. So he's aware of that, and he's obviously looking at putting the investment in. It's just, when does it stop for him? Essentially, is kind of what it
Never.
is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So if the infill stayed the way it was, and staff had actually mentioned to him, if you take that center set of windows that we're looking at, and you narrowed them and you added one, it would, if I remember correctly, we were being very precise with our sticky notes and measuring on the sticky notes. I think you could potentially get the same appearance. I don't know with the framing, you know, right now they've got it smack dab in the middle, and if you end up with 5 across instead of 4, then what, do you end up with 2 verticals? Like you go over one on each side and you have a vertical, or you have one that's offset, I don't know. But we felt that maybe that's a possibility, so that all of those windows would look extremely similar in their width of them, of the glass.
I think that's a goal worth pursuing.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Scenic River Overlay Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant provides the details for the required site-proof gate for the dumpster enclosure to staff prior to the issuance of the certificate of approval, and the applicant works with staff to revise the window proportions and infill proportions to more closely mirror/match the proportions on that facade.
A motion? A second?
Second?
I think that was, Dana, were you the second? Okay. So, and I think Katie mentioned this earlier, and we've had significant discussion about windows and the infill, because we kind of wanted to get some direction so that we know going into this what our conversation will be like with the applicant. I think we just talked about that one window. If you added one and then you end up with them, that would definitely address the window proportions on that one. As far as infill proportions,
Yeah. Can I just clarify my motion to say
Yes.
the applicant works with staff to revise the window proportions, specifically the center bay window proportions?
the center bay on Robinson.
Correct, thank you.
Okay.
I have no modifications to the recommended motion regarding infill proportions.
Okay, so works with staff to revise the window proportions of the center bay on Robinson, is what you were saying. And were you also still including the infill proportions? Or were you not including that with your motion?
I I would leave the text as recommended by staff
And
to
add
give
that
discrepancy
phrase?
to staff in that negotiation.
Okay. So
It-
does Dana needed to accept it?
I
Okay.
do second that
Gotcha.
motion with the clarification.
For the record and clarity, that's aluminum storefront B, just to make sure that we're talking about the right ones. It's labeled B, so I think that's and my comment there.
Correct.
I can see it going either way. I understand that the existing building constraints is kind of dictating this unique geometry. And so I think that we're going to get an offset in the proportion of kind of the infill, which it's one or the other. So I think, like you said, it's closer. Let's match the architecture. I agree with that. But I understand initially when we were talking about trying to reconfigure the bays, the existing garage and door proportions and stuff, or we have to work with those existing conditions. So I'm on board with that, so thank you.
All right, we have a move and a second. Do we have a vote? All right, it's passed. As presented.
Thank you.
Item 7, other business. And, no, did I pass one? No. Yeah, other business, BOA 15375 at 101 Southeast 4th Street, Regatta.
And staff is going to advise you that we have received a request from the applicant to continue this
Okay,
to your June meeting, which would be June the 1st.
all right, item will be continued. Item 8, communications.
So do they have to actually vote?
You have to vote on
So
that?
you need to,
Continue?
Well, if we don't vote on it, it's automatically continued to the next meeting, but if you want to set it on a date certain, like in,
which is June 1st, which is the next meeting.
And that's what the applicant
So-
wants to do?
to be safe, let's vote to continue it.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to continue this item?
I will move to continue this item to the June 1st meeting.
Have a second?
Second, Howard.
Was that, oh, Scott, okay. So we had a John yeah, we go. Thank you so
There it
much.
is.
And then John was in 2 places at once there for a minute. 4, 5, 6. Thank you.
All right. Now, item 8, communications. Administrative approval report.
So if you haven't noticed it, the church on Portland, because that is a huge project, you guys, it was before you, it's an enormous, and so there were certain things, the dumpster detail, they finally gave that to me. They haven't given me the signs yet, but you ought to go by, because it's really exciting that they're staying there and putting all of that at that location. Was there any questions about any of the others? Nope.
All right. Comments, item B, comments from planning department staff?
Obviously, we have a meeting next month, because we just continued a case, but we have a bunch of
Okay.
other ones that are already on my draft agenda for next month. So you'll be probably getting an early quorum call from me, so you can check your calendars, so we can make sure we'll have a quorum for that meeting.
Very good. Comments from other committee members? All right. Hearing none, next meeting date, next regular meeting is Thursday, June 1, 2023. And with that, I'll adjourn. May the 4th be with you.
Thank you.